Great. So this is one of my favorite moments in my week, every week, is moving into our Sangha. It's definitely become a very, on a personal level, very grounding ritual and space. So I'm really excited that you all are joining this evening. Our facilitator tonight, Zochi, I've known for, I'd say, gosh, now I'm stuck. I think about 10 years, We met in Oakland, California at a youth arts organization called Destiny Arts Center. And we had, the opportunity to do a lot of programs in Oakland schools. When Zochi, when we met, I was referred by a friend. I think it was maybe, I'm trying to remember, maybe Rashid. It could have been, yeah. And really high recommendation. And when we met and we had a chance to talk, really was impressed that that Zochi kind of was who he was and did what he did. He'd been practicing martial arts, for example, for 40 years when we met. And I was shocked that he was in such great shape. And when I eventually, and I won't reveal it, but eventually found out his age, I was like, wow, okay, I got a role model here for, sustainable life, for health and wellness and keeping myself fit. So definitely Zochi's been a mentor in that area and someone who's really used the healing arts for himself, and then also always had an eye and a value on how that kind of expresses itself in the community. And I think that's a centerpiece of his work as I see it. So I'll give a little bit of a background, a bit of his bio so that you can understand who he is better. And then we'll move right into it. So Zochi Young is a teacher, author, a wellness architect, and founder of Tenesu, which is an African-based restorative and holistic wellness project designed to infuse wellness as a core principle within the social construct of all communities. He's a master teacher who uses holistic and evidence-based modalities to create a transformative container for experiential learning. His kinesthetic movement praxis, mental affirmations, and real-life practicums assist the learner to easily bridge the ancient teachings and principles to address the needs and challenges of our contemporary society. He's an active practitioner and teacher of various healing modalities, including Taiji, Qigong, Smai Tawi, which is Kemetic yoga, somatic healing, transformative meditation, and Tuina, as well as being proficient in several martial arts disciplines. He studied, practiced, and enhanced his craft for over 45 years as an integrative and restorative practice. So Zochi, I'm really happy to hand the space over to you. Welcome to the Sangha. And by the way, Zochi's joining us, although originally from Detroit, if I'm correct, if I have it right. I'm pretty sure I have that one right. He's joining us from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia at the moment. That's also important. So Zochi, welcome to the Sangha.
Welcome. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Salim, for inviting me and doing the introduction. Today, what we're going to talk about is the Alchemy of Change and the transformative intention of practice. I'm making an assumption that everyone here has a practice, is doing the practice. And the title really is from a book I am about to release in October. Alchemy of Change has taken me several years to write it, and we could say it's almost a life work because there's a lot of life experiences in it. But this is a discussion that I hope to facilitate, so it's not just going to be about me. We're going to actually have some movement practices, and we're going to look at some affirmations, and we're going to have some discussion along the way. As it is typically, and when I'm teaching, I like to know who's in the room, and for this particular case, what is your practice? So if I can get each one of you to introduce yourself, what your name is, what is your practice, and what is your expectation?
I'm happy to help call people out too. Sometimes it's helpful on Zoom to do that. Is that okay, Zochi? Or do you want to do that?
Sure, that'd be perfect. No, that would
Okay.
be perfect if you could do
Okay,
that.
because I know some of the folks. So I'm just gonna go around. We can start with Eleanor.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Ellie. Mostly have a yoga practice going. Yeah.
Great, we can keep rolling. Were there any other, what were the other items, Zochi, just for the next folks? Practice and,
Just
expectations.
Name, practice, and expectation. Yes.
Okay, great. So, Dad.
Hey, how's everybody? This is Bryant Rollins, Salim's dad. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. And I guess Shirley and I have a rather eclectic practice. It's a combination of a walking meditation, sitting meditation, Tai Chi, reading, and I guess I think about it moment by moment. And so my actual practice is staying conscious with every breath. So in a sense, it's a breathing meditation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, Erin.
Yeah, hi, my name is Erin. I'm in Kilifi, which is on the coast of Kenya. My practice is yoga and meditation, and I'd even say running as part of my practice as well.
Great, thanks,
Thank you.
Erin. Sharonda.
I'm Sharonda. I'm getting back to my practice of yoga and meditation.
Okay. And any expectations from this?
Just to be open and be willing to change.
Wonderful. Okay, Neil.
Hi guys, I'm Neil, calling in from Nairobi. My practice involves yoga, meditation, exercise, love exercise. I also work a 12-step program, which is a big part of my life. And so this idea, this topic of change is one that's super close to my heart. So in terms of expectations, I'm just looking forward to seeing where the discourse goes. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Neil. Lev.
Greetings. Lev calling in from South Carolina, St. Helena Island. And currently, the pillars of my practice are fatherhood. And within that, capoeira, Angola, is always foremost at the forefront of my practice, as well as movement in general. Kind of integrating exposure to Qigong and energetic cultivation practices, breath work, and intuitive movement exploration from different martial arts practices, and as well as a foundation in KTV, meditation, and I guess you can call it a similar, like a yogic practice, but not from the Vedic tradition, from the Kemetic tradition.
Great, thank you, Lev. Emily.
Oh, can you guys hear me? Yeah, it looks like it. Greetings, everyone. My name is Emily. I'm up in south of Sweden, so still quite much north compared to everyone else. And I'm happy to meet you, Zochi. Pleased to meet you, mister.
Nice.
I'm happy that you're in Addis Ababa.
Well.
I've been to that country, Ethiopia. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. I'm happy that you are there and hope you're doing well. So I'm doing yoga. I'm also teaching yoga. And I used to be a dancer. Well, I will always be a dancer, I guess. And I'm into martial arts. So I'm doing a lot of what Lev said, intuitive movement exploration, or something very nice that he said. I'm really into that healing movement, and also had a nice summer with a lot of meditation, which have been very grounding, and I'm grateful for that. And as far as expectations, what I always feel in this community setting of listening to others and having a conversation is a lot of support. And I'm not saying I expect that, but I really experience it every time. And that gives me strength for change or to handle any kind of situation. So that's all.
Beautiful. That makes us, that's music to our ears. Okay, great. Nyamwati.
Hi, everybody. I'm hoping you guys can hear me. Okay, great. My practice or practices are a combination of the body arts, you know, yoga, just self-discovery through the physical arts, as well as psychotherapy and coaching. And I'm very interested in seeing the integration of change from practices that are in a dojo, you know, in a confined space, to real life practice. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Linda Key.
Hi everyone, I'm Linda Key. I'm up here in Canada, in Calgary, Alberta. Mainly the foundation of my practice is trying my best to go through the Synergy program that they offer right now. So doing vinyasa classes during the week and a couple meditation classes, movement class, and the weekend Sangha. I'm also an arts facilitator, so I'm a theater of the oppressed practitioner using the arts for social change. And I think I was fortunate to take your workshop here on the Synergy platform a couple of months ago, I think, Zochi. So I guess my expectation is an extension of what some of what you taught us that day, and also to build up my toolkit in terms of maintaining daily self-care, daily, you know, physical health, mental health, and learning more tools. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
Okay, Frederick. And you'll have to unmute.
Hello, everyone. You hear me?
Hey, Frederick.
Yes.
My practice is meditation and mindfulness, mindful walking. I just very interested in listening to knowledge and explore.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Frederick.
Wonderful. Thanks, Frederick. And Sapna, we're just giving our name, what our practice or practices are, and what our expectation is from this workshop.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Sapna. Pleasure to meet you, Zochi, and be here with everyone again. My practice is, I'm an intuitive energy healer, so my practice has a lot to do with the chakra system and being able to work with energy in that way, as well as yoga and meditation, and just really being in nature as much as possible. I'm in Nairobi, in Kenya, and just being outdoors really sort of restores my spirit and refreshes me, and which is fantastic. And I think in terms of expectations, I don't really have any expectations more than, apart from really, I guess, learning as much as I can from this amazing community and feeling supported and being here to support others as well. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thanks. And that's everyone, Zochi.
That's pretty much. Oh, perfect, good. You know, one of the reasons I asked that question is really to really feel like we have everybody in the room. That we did our breath and we centered ourselves. And the topic is the alchemy of change. And what, you know, we're going to look at what is alchemy and what is change. And in a time of COVID-19 In certain parts of the country, where in the US is Black Lives Matters, and we have political disruption and change occurring. Always my number one question is, how do we evolve with these practices that we have beyond getting stuck in our patterns? So that's what this workshop or facilitation is going to be about, is how far do we think outside of the box other than our practice? And one of those key processes is we start off with our intention. So our intention, when we start our practice, I'm sure each one of us has a particular intention that we bring to the practice. But for right now, we're going to take a couple more breaths. And I want you to think about an intention for your practice that is inclusive of oneself and larger of oneself. And as we do this, as we just stand or sit, I'd like you to sit, if you're not on the bike, because I did see somebody on the bike, I'd like you to lengthen, sit onto the edge of your seat, and take a deep breath. And we're going to set our intentions not only for what we are doing today, but our intention what's happening in the world. Okay? So everybody take a deep breath, and we'll just take a few deep breaths. And breathing in, lengthening with integrity from above and dignity from below. Widening in relationship to oneself, others, and the universe. Taking a deep breath in. Deepening forward and back to the space that is yours. Center around your intention, an intention that is inclusive of oneself and larger than oneself. Take a deep breath in. And sit in that intention for a moment and breathe. Good. So we are all now centered. Now take your hands and just rub your hands for a moment. Rub them, gathering that energy, bringing the center, and then bringing it over your face and relax. Okay? We'll do that 2 more times. We're going to rub our hands. Get them nice and warm. Let you know, in Addis is a little cold and rainy here, so I can really appreciate this. And then rubbing against your neck. And just give yourself a nice massage along the neck and just really relaxing. You can bring your hands through your hair like I'm seeing a couple of people do. And that actually relaxes the mind as well. So we're actually going to give us that. And then the last time that we're going to rub our hands together. And then we're going to place our hands on our belly. And let's just breathe. Okay. It sounds like we should be ready. So the alchemy of change. We all of us, judging from what everyone says, has a practice. And we're trying to change something in our life, right? Whether it be improving our body, our mind, our spirit, making us a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more gentler. But these practices, at least from my observation and study, are designed to change our society, right? So in our practice, by setting an intention that is inclusive of ourselves, but larger than ourselves, hopefully, our larger intention is to have an impact on the society and to create change in the world. Taking our practice off the mat and into the world, so in our basic interactions with other people, that we create change. So this is an assumption of mine, and I'd like to check and see if that, you can give me a thumbs up, or you can just wave and say, yes, this is my my intention, okay? Because, it's like a little bit about me, it's like Salim introduced me, and I do come from Detroit. And then I've been doing these practices since, say, 1955, 1960. 1960, 65, somewhere around there. And one of the number one questions that I had when I was a youth or in my teenage years is, how do we evolve, right? We see, we look at history, and we seem to be revolving instead of evolving, right? And so how do we evolve? With taking these practices, how do we evolve from what we are today to a world that most of us hope that will come into fruition? So in this book I wrote, The Alchemy of Change and the Transformative Intention of Practice, I'm just going to really take some observations, and please chime in. You don't have to agree with me, you don't have to disagree with me, but I want this to be a conversation instead of a lecture. I'm not a very good lecturer. So one of the things that, at least I'll start with the arts that I know. In Taiji, or in yoga, the practices are to bring the mind, body, and spirit into one, to be connected to a single universe, right? There is no duality. There is only one energy. Although there are many, as we look around on the screen, there are many of us, and we have our individual identities, but at the same time, we are one as an energy spirit, because when we start looking at who we are beyond the physical and what we are as energy, then we can only conclude that all of us are interconnected. With a simple thing as breath. We breathe in, and then we breathe out, and we all share that breath, right? Around the world. So let's take an example for California. The fires in California right now are burning, but the smoke can be found in Germany or in Ethiopia, right? It shows you how small our world is. So how do we change? I'm sure is everybody happy where we're at? Yes? No? Indifferent, right? We do these practices of yoga. And when we look at yoga, it's like nowadays, that we look at yoga and it's seemingly, or the majority of people see it as a asana practice, all right? But when we look at the history and religion of the practice, the only asana there was meditation and sitting, right? In the process of changing ourselves. And most of these practices came out of monasteries or isolation to have this higher sense of spirituality, to be more than what we are, and in hopes to changing the world. So we have these individuals that have come and they've given us Dharma. And where, you know, it's like we have our Sangha and we have our Dharma. And these are the things that are tools to help us guide ourselves. And so, you know, my question to you is, how do you see yourself evolving? And I'll give you everyone doesn't have to answer at once, but I'd like to see a few people answering that question. How do we evolve? How do we change for the betterment for not just this generation, but 7 generations in the future?
That's a great question. I think everyone's stumped. One thing that came to mind for me, Zochi, is the impressions that we in some ways leave on our children or younger people. You know, so thinking about generational and intergenerational experiences and vision and information as well. What information is we start to value, and then kind of in some ways, I don't want to say imprint, but share with our children or cultivate or guide our children around. Of course, they start to have their own values, but they're also brought up in a context, right, in a home. So that, for me, is really important when we look, you know, longer term. And then, like you said, a lot of the internal work, and then for me as well, the community spaces, and really thinking about those spaces intergenerationally as well. So keeping that, and this is to me kind of the foundation, you know, in terms of the relationship between a child and a grandparent or great grandparent, the elder, and the, you know, that relationship has always historically been cultivated. And I feel like it's something that in a lot of modern society has been kind of lost and compromised, and maybe we're starting to have these conversations again, but that piece is so important. You know, if you think of a child and a grandparent, that relationship has always been it's been very important to the fabric of a lot of cultures, like really, really important. And there's been, you know, to the point where people in West Africa name their children after they, you know, foster that creation and recognize it, you know, on a spiritual level. So intergenerational spaces, I think, and information across generations as well.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Come on, don't be shy. Okay, we'll continue. All right, so let's look at practice. I'm going to make some distinctions in the vocabulary. In the alchemy of change, I talk about several different ideas. So what we do in the studios, I see that as training, right? We train our bodies and mind, and we achieve a certain level of goals or accomplishment. But what we do out in the world is practice, right? So we do movement for movements. So what I mean by that is our movement, yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, boxing, whatever that is, we do these movements with an intentional practice, right? We don't do them haphazardly. We come to the mat every day in order to achieve a particular goal. At least at the very worst, to bring ourselves back to center every day. So we can at least accomplish the small things in life without losing our stuff, right? But how do we take this off the mat? So what's the difference between training and practice? Because all of this is an element of an alchemy. So for example, we come to the mat and we begin to breathe. And we bring ourselves into a still state. We find center, right? And at the end of this practice, whether we're doing yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, we feel good about ourselves and we feel centered. And we step out onto the streets, into our workplace or into our houses and our family, and something triggers us. It could be a discomfortable conversation. So now that, and have to pull one of your employees on the side to have a conversation that's not comfortable for either one of you. Now you have to bring your practice, bring the training into the practice. Everybody follow me on that? Yes? No? Okay, good. So we're bringing how do we do that, right? In our training, we are in safe places. Or one of my associates would say, we are in brave spaces sometimes that appear to be safe places, right? We go to these places to get what we need, and we find ourselves trying to end up taking care of others when we're there to take care of ourselves. Does that happen to some of you? Yes? Right? So, and there's, it's like our classes are about, as a teacher, our classes are an hour and a half or hour. And so as a teacher, how do we help the student to make that transition from training to practice to changing their lives and the lives of others around them? Any suggestions? No?
I want to hear I want to get some information on that though. Like, I'd love, I'm like,
okay.
I'm like, feed me.
Okay,
I know
good.
that one thing that works for my students, as I have students, is reminding them to, again, use their breath and come back into the present moment and just be present and really allow themselves to feel whatever it is that they're feeling in that moment. There's nothing that's good, nothing that's bad necessarily, but just to be able to become that witness and the observer to whatever's coming up for them in that present moment, and then being able to use their breath to bring it back to, again, that moment. So that's a practice that has worked for me, and I find works for them as well.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Coming back to the breath, finding center is always a good practice. We do that sitting on the cushion. We do that in standing in asana. We do that in movement practices like Qigong or Taiji. But we're doing that in safe places. So one of the things that I offer my students is practicums. What I found over the years of teaching is that I could talk a good story about this practice is going to bring you to center and you're going to feel good and you'll be more productive and it's good for your health and all the benefits that are hanging on the branches. But we're not taking care of the root, right? We're not, or I am not, or was not taking care of the root. I'll speak for myself. And so how do we get to the root that changes our society, right? We can kind of say we change ourselves. Sometimes I think that's a false narrative. Some of my colleagues would disagree because we see the research that people are more productive, people are more relaxed, There are, it's like Taiji, for example, is good for a variety of, hypertension and nervous conditions and so forth and so on. But then we look outside the window of our studios or our dojos or our practice halls, and we look at the world, and it's in shambles, right? We find that we see that with COVID, a world is in fact impacted and full of uncertainty. So how do we change that? How do we make that differently? So one of the things that I give my students is practicums, coming back to practicums. And what is a practicum? So we may talk about the principle. And like, for example, we set our intention. And so in Taiji, we have a movement called moving obstacles out of the way. So I'm gonna step out and show you this, if I can, tilt this out a little bit. Yeah, all right. So the movement itself is moving obstacles out of the way, okay? So we start off, we come up here, we breathe, bring our hands down, making an invitation to the universe. So we open ourselves up, opening the chest and the heart, and we open ourselves up and reaching as if we're making an invitation to the universe. Then our hand comes down and moves those obstacles out of the way. And then we advocate for ourselves. Right? So taking that one principle as a thread through the rest of this practice, so we begin, we center. And so at the end of our practice, if that is the practice that we're doing, I ask my students to go out into the workplace or into their world and use this principle at least every day for a week, this one principle of just opening up, making an invitation to a conversation, to a difficult situation. Find those low-hanging fruit first before you try to get those high things, those number 10, right? So you don't just jump into it and get in a hot, heated conversation. You start, so with those, maybe the 1s or 2s or 3s, and having those conversations or where you start to really practice what your training has taught you, right? So you got 20 students, 30 students, 40 if you're lucky, right? Each one going out in the world and practicing being centered, being able to listen. So like in Tai Chi, listening is one of our core principles. We have to listen not only with our heart, but we have to listen with our kinesthetic energy. So we listen with the whole body, mind, ears, heart, spirit. So we can be engaged with the individual and not lose that connection that often happens in our day-to-day activities. So taking your practicum out in the world, finding one thing that you can do for a week or 2 weeks, and practicing that until you get to a level of comfort that you sit with that, and now it is a part of your toolbox, right? Anyone heard of nonviolent communications? Just raise your hand if you have, if you haven't. Okay, yeah. So we start with this conversation using our practice. So let's say, so we do this over and over again until we feel comfortable, we feel calm, and we're at a relaxed state so we can stay in connection with one individual to another. This is a track of alchemy that changing, changing from iron to gold, or I think that was iron to gold, that we create an environment that internally and externally we change the way we interact with one another. That is, for me, the important thing of practice. That is the thing that we can, and in doing training, setting intention, and then having a practicum or a praxis that we take out into the world, we are actually changing the internal part of and the neurons in our brain. And as we do this, the people that we interact with are changing as well, right? Because we've set a model and a precedence of how to communicate with another person, how to solve a problem. And the biggest piece to this is we get out of our own way. So moving obstacles out of the way are not just the obstacles that are in front of you. Those are the obstacles in you, the experiences, the fear that we have in ourselves, the filters that we typically hear. So we have to move ourselves out of the way in order to be connected and engaged, right? So everyone see where I'm going with this? Yes? No. Don't go to sleep. Right? So the action of moving obstacles out of the way is a physical metaphor for us to remember that when we step into these situations outside of practice, the first thing we should do is move obstacles out of the way, including our ego, right? Including those filters that we have or those presumptions that we have for one another, right? We need to move them out of the way. And Tai Chi is, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it. A lot of people practice Tai Chi as a health practice, but Tai Chi's origin is as a martial art. And so we, in the practice, we learn to step to the side. So whatever is coming in is not going to immediately harm us, right? Moving out of the way. And that then we can listen closely with the person and connect. And in that listening, we can begin to lead a conversation, or we can redirect the negative energy or the energy that's coming in so the other person can see our core values are the same, right? We can disagree on a lot of content out there, but if we can get to the core value, we'll find that our core values are very, very similar. And whatever the dispute or argument or thing that we really want to change, we move that out of the way and come back to our core value. And once we can agree on the core value, then we can bring that thing back in and look at it together, right? The alchemy of change. So our practices of meditation, if we just sit on the pillow and we feel good about ourselves, and then we walk out in the street and be a prick, what good is our practice, right? What good is the training if we wake up every morning? I just was talking to an associate of mine and who's been practicing for a number of years, but they wake up and with dread, and then they get to the mat and they feel good, and then they're bombarded by the news or current events, and then stuck in social distancing, and then their dread returns. So are we changing? This is really important. It's like, I don't get, it's really important to get feedback, because if, I'm just talking to a screen, I could talk to a rock.
I can say something,
but,
Mr.
it's important.
If I may.
Thank you. Jump in, please.
So I don't want to.
Yes.
I don't want to stop you because I like what you're saying, and I can hear you very well, Mister. And I believe that it's about a lot about motivation. Motivation coming from being convinced and confident in our beliefs, like beliefs and values. So I value when I'm on my mat. I value peace. I value being centered in harmony and creative freedom or something like that. I value these things, but also I'm thinking that what is a value? Value is a value when you do value it. So you need to do it actively, like not only on the mat. All these things you already kind of said, and I have I'm not gonna just repeat what you said. I just hear you, and I want to bring another kind of thought into it that when I do teach and also in my own mind, I like to bring also not only the practice from the mat out in the world, but also bring the reality kind of into the mat. So the opposite. And in what way it can be, for example, I'm trying to find my words, so thank you for your patience. Instead of thinking of your body, maybe when you're on your mat as a temple, and you have to be so cautious and you have to be so serene there, it's just your house. This is my house. I can I can invite friends over sometimes, have a party there, and then I need to clean it again and restore things, and I need to walk out walk through every room sometimes and really open the windows and get fresh air and all of those things. And in the language it can also be there, talking about, I'm not going to give too many examples. I just want to give that perspective, that talking about the body in a more real way. This is these parts, your pelvis and these things, you have them, and you can cherish them, and they don't have to have fancy words or anything,
Thank you for chiming in. I really appreciate that. I find this is a really important subject when we talk about the alchemy of change. It's something that is interlaid in most internal practices, right? They've written many books about being harmonious with nature. One of my teachers would tell me that our practice, or Tai Chi or yoga in particular, and I use those interchangeable because, as I say, yoga is the bringing the mind, heart, the mind, spirit, and body into one. And most of the internal practices, when you look at historically, they're all the same. They're all using breath. They're all using a form of meditation to bring us to a single state, right? So we can name it anything that we like. Some schools have particular practices, but that's just like we have a different car, right? Some people drive a Mercedes, some people have a Benz, some people have a Volkswagen, right? We are using these practices as vehicles to get us to a higher level of understanding. And so my teacher would tell me is that these practices are to get us out of the habitual, get us out of our habits, and to return us to our natural state, right? And so my question is, well, how do I know I'm back to my natural state? I've never been there, right? What is our natural state like, right? We have these outer conditions. Our society is telling us that we need to work hard and be a success. We need a certain amount of money to do things. But in the beautiful part about, say, COVID, it has changed the world and it's forced people to look at their lives really. what is important to them, to come back to a relationship, right? And sit into a practice that allows you to do the things that you want to do outside of what the society has told you that is your life, right? For me, I would hate my life would be to be born, to live, and to die, knowing that our practices promise to take us further than that. You know, to be in harmony. What is that? Anyone have an idea? We use these words of harmony and peace, justice, but what does that really feel like? Can we maintain that state of being? Or is it just something that we can feel on the mat? Is it a temporary state and not a permanent state? What do you think? Are these things that we accomplish, or is these are just temporary states of being?
I think there's, yeah, I mean, I can share. For me, there's the idea of, you know, certainly for me, having experienced different moments of like what I feel like is like deep, I'd maybe describe as deep connectedness, you know, bliss of, you know, really, really kind of being in alignment and connection. And so there's the idea for me of through sustained practice and discipline of kind of cultivate. So to me, that's where it is on the mat, is like by practicing frequently and pushing through like some of the mental back talk sometimes, like in the morning, like, I don't feel like practicing, you know, just working through it a little bit. So you go on the mat anyway. It doesn't have to be an intense practice. It can be soft, but just the regularity of it, that for me, that helps bring it into the work, just because it's in my body. It's the routine of it to me that helps it kind of become something that gets into, you know, into the kind of fabric of my body, my bones. So that's where the physical becomes, you know, it starts to become more normalized when I am out in the world. In terms of the other thing you talked about, like, do these states fluctuate? And even in talking about, you were saying like coming back to like a natural state. Like, to me, that's also something that's constantly changing in my mind. Nature doesn't stay still, right? It kind of evolves, it grows, it goes through different stages. So I think there is, in my mind, there is flux. When we talk about a natural state, and maybe that's something that's always changing somewhat too. What's natural to us today wouldn't have been natural necessarily. A lot of the things wouldn't have been natural to humans 400 years ago. And we don't necessarily want the things that kind of at some point would have been natural to us necessarily. You know, we've kind of evolved a bit differently. So it's interesting just to think about and talk about what is natural for us. Is it a stagnant thing, and is it evolving? Are we co-creating it, which is kind of how I would probably describe it? And if so, then what does that look like? What does it show up like? And what is it we're co-create? What is it we're, because to me, we have, you know, the power of creation is 100% within us. That's no question. I mean, we can procreate, we can create, right? Most people, you know, and we can create mentally, if not physically anyway. So then it's a question of what are we creating, and what, you know, how does that become natural?
Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in?
I'd like to speak to that, kind of building off what Salim was saying, and how when I observe nature, you know, one of the foremost principles that comes to mind is flow. That there's a flow of life, a flow of energy, and wherever that flow becomes obstructed or stopped or blocked in some way, it's almost like there are many agents or many forces that come to that space to then transform that space to get it flowing again. It's almost like an inherent principle, you know, an inherent mechanism within this body of life that we exist in. And to bring it back to the self, you know, we know when we get stagnated. We know when we can recognize within ourselves when we're not in that flow state. And most of us kind of are conditioned out of that state, pretty in order to function in our society. And so for me, the practices, don't necessarily, they always look different. And some days I can't necessarily get to the mat because of the demands of life. But making sure that I take that principle that I'm trying to embody in my practice, find a way to embody it in my life, because it's just a different context. But the work is internal, so you can do that work wherever you are at any point. Yeah, that's what's come to mind with this discussion.
I appreciate what Lev is saying about, finding the fluidity and, observing nature. And, I feel like a lot of, my background is just observing circles, and my background in Capoeira Angola, the roda, the circle, is very sacred space and circular movements. I read recently a little bit regarding like reason and faith. I was talking about Salim with it the other day. Like reason is kind of like repetition, routine, and faith is more exploration, adventure. And even though reason keeps us sane and grounded, miracles cannot happen without faith. Faith takes us beyond our limitations. So for me, the practice is like the reason sometimes, the routine, the grounding, and, maintaining these two components dancing together.
Thank you. So I heard a couple of points I want to talk to. Embodiment is a theme that comes through most of our disciplines, right? Our goal is to embody these practices, right? To take them out, and when we have embodied them, how do we know that we've embodied them, right? We take them out in the world, and that practice, the practicum or the praxis of practice into the world gives us feedback of, have we truly embodied it, or are we living in an illusion, right? Are we living in that illusion, or are we really embodying the practice, the discipline, right? Are we following the flow of nature, right? So a tree will grow from a seed to a sibling to a full-grown tree. But the tree, that is its nature, right? That is its nature. That doesn't change. It is still a tree, right? And it will blossom and it will drop seeds. Taking a quote from Capoeira, it will drop seeds or fruit into the ground, right? And there too will not become bushes. They will not become air, but they will become a tree. The true nature of who they are. So I'm going to take a little further leap. And so, are we these bodies? Multiple color, men, women, trans, whatever. Are we these bodies? Or are these bodies our little vehicles to move us around, move our spirit around? What is our true nature? And examining that, as when we do the training in our disciplines or in our vehicles of discipline, such as yoga and Tai Chi, Qigong, and so forth and so on, what are we really training? Are we training the body? Excuse me. And then at some point the body goes away and that's the end of who we are? But the alchemy and the beauty of alchemy, it is that we are changing something that we cannot touch. So I can change my muscle, I can do push-ups, I can get in changaranga, or I can do warrior's pose, and that's going to affect my body, but my spirit, my mind, is the thing that we're working on in our practice. That is the thing that we're changing. You know, we have all, you know, it's right here, we have multiple different sizes and shapes of physical beings. But what is our goal? What are we trying to embody? Now, you know, it's really a question upon questions. So one thing I would say, I have a science fiction book that I guess I've been working on for years, and I've got an outline and I haven't done anything. But in this science fiction book I have that ties to the Alchemy of Change is that we are spiritual beings coming to earth into a physical experience. And that we have that physical experience so we can continue our spiritual journey. Right? People follow me, is that too far science fiction? And I lost everybody. Excuse me.
Following.
So, following, okay, good. So with these practices, and let's look at the origin of these practices. Like yoga is a form of Hindu religion, which was primarily meditation. Eventually in the 60s became a more gymnastic physical practice. But the goal was to change the inner self, the spirit of ourselves, having correct speech, correct thought, right? So we could change the environment which we're in, right? Tai Chi, actually the physical practice is something relatively new, but the spiritual practice, Tai Chi means the grand ultimate, the great divine, the universal properties of yin and yang, polarity, all right? So these practices are Qigong. You know, we're talking about moving the internal energy from the inside to the outside and the outside in, so that we can find balance in our lives, right? All of these practices, when we look at their principles, are not talking about our physicality or the kinesthetics of movement, but talking about how we can be much better spiritual beings, right? So these practices, we are, you know, again, coming back to the thing, an alchemy, a process that allows us to change over a period of time. And I find that, you know, I'm of the belief that these practices have gone on for thousands of years, but my thing is okay, yoga is practiced 3,000 years. Smai Tawi was practiced 5,000 years. And I look around me in the modern world and I don't see much changing as far as the human condition. You know, we still have war. So where's the peace? We still have illness, sickness. So where's our compassion, right? We still have those who have and have not. In a world of plenty, and which we don't share. So I have to say, something is not happening fast enough to really create change. Because like Salim pointed out earlier, a lot of times when we think about change is we think about the next generation, right? That hopefully they will have a solution, and we do our best to pad that, but it never seems to be enough. From one generation to another generation, from one war to another war, nothing changes. Maybe one of my teachers, Reverend Angel Kiddo Williams, would say, it's almost as if we're just moving chess pieces on a board, and we're calling that change, when actually what we are looking for is transformation, right? So in closing, I think I have just a few minutes, but by setting our intentions, and my intentions is really, it's like I see all of you as change agents, taking your practice into the world to change the world, changing ourselves, obviously, but taking our practice further and actually changing the world. So each one teach 10, and some of you have more than 10. So just taking a little bit more time with what you're teaching and make it a practicum that they take out into the world, and they can see that what they've done on the floor is training. What they do in the world is practice. And through both of those two disciplines, we create change within ourselves and in the society as a whole. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, Janelle, I can hear you.
Okay. So this is beautiful. I didn't get to speak much because I have the kids with me, and I'm kind of running around, but I really resonated with this a lot. What I'm wondering is, to test. You talked about, with Tai Chi and as it started as a martial art, but now it's become kind of a practice of movement, right? Is it necessary for the fight? Is it necessary for that fight to actually totally test it? Or and then if it is necessary for that fight, or to totally understand the movements, right, of Tai Chi, do you have to, if they were created, and I'm not even sure if they were created for fighting in general, or was it a mix of them both? Do you need the test? Do you need that test to really understand the movements in their totality, or can you understand them in their totality without the fight?
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah. And it's one that in the Tai Chi community is always asked. We have one side that is looking at this is a martial art, and they see it as a martial art, and they're testing that energy. And really, that's 10% of Tai Chi, right? It's a very small percentage, the martial aspect, because like I said, starting off, these practices are metaphors of how we live our life. So in Taiji in particular, it is good to have the practice, because Tai Chi starts off with a singular practice, and then you do partner practices. And so you get to practice the physicality of what listening is. You get to practice the physicality of the hearing and leading and following. And you can see just the name of these terms are taking you into another place of where these are transferable qualities that you can take out in the world to be able to listen, to be able to follow, right? To be able to lead, right? So you need that physicality. Is it the combat component of it? Maybe not necessarily. If you can understand the concepts underneath the practice.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe we can't get away from the physicality of the art. We need that that connection with each individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's like, I don't know, some of you are teachers, some of you are not, but when we don't have that physicality or relationship with someone, so I used to have a student that used to be like this, and I would tell him to relax, and he says, I am relaxed, right? And I put a mirror in front of him, and he says, I'm relaxed. So not until we taught him to soften with touch and having the physicality that he could bring himself to a new normal.
Yeah.
Right? A new normal, which found himself more centered, where he's always like this or crunched like this. You know, we're homogeneous beings. We find an opportunity, if we are stuck between a rock and a hard place, we find comfort in that rock and a hard place instead of stepping out of it and finding another way. So I hope that answers your question. I think physicality is important. That's why we have these practices of yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, and other practices that are internal. And they're called internal practices because we are technically changing the way we are from the inside out, opening that inner door that can't be reached by any other key, but through our practice. But thank you for that question. I hope I answered it. Is that?
That was great. It leads to my second question, because the way that you answered it, with the rock and the hard place and the searching, we're all searching for this flow, and then people had talked about it earlier, and we know that we get that flow when we get onto the mat. And there was talks early of it not being, not being able to use that in the world. But so my question is, do you think that flow is always actually there, and it's really the perspective that we don't see it, or we can't feel it always because of external things, or because of the position not being at, sometimes people can't, if they're not in the studio, they can't get into the flow. Sometimes people can't get there in nature, they can't get into the flow, or they can't get into a certain flow without, their teacher being there. And then it's so is it really the flow that's changing? Isn't the flow always there, and it's really just our perspective, or us having a hard time connecting to that flow? That is, I'm just wondering. And then are there exercises that you like to do with your students that get them away from being attached to their regular routine? Some people are so routine. It's like if their mat changes, or if anything changes, they're unable to find that flow. When what we want is, even if you were at war, or even if you were somewhere in an intense place, you would still be able to find that flow, because that's what, saves you, right? That's the point, right?
Right. Yeah, I think, thank you for that question. And the flow is, it's like you read all these different books, psychological books and sports books and yoga books, and they all talk about being in the flow. The simple question is, we are one energy. So yes, the flow, the energy is always there. That, and so to be able to tap into that is really the practice, right? That in some ways we have to detach from the practice, or as it's said in Buddhism, is we don't become attached to the flow, right? It's like if you're groping for something, it always seems to move a little bit ahead of you. But if we practice, say, a simple thing of standing in place, aligning ourselves, rooting ourselves into the ground, that energy flows through us. So even in a standing position, we can be in the flow. In nature, we can be in the flow. In the workplace, we can be in the flow. Will the flow feel different? Yes, but the flow is still there. And I think, Salim, did you give me time to, is it time to wrap up?
No, I'm not giving you a cue yet.
Okay, okay. I just checking. So, you know, so the energy is always there. And one of the things that you asked me, what do I do with my students? So starting from a field of stillness and making, allowing ourselves to be hypersensitive to what is going on around us, to really feel the air. The air is always moving, even in the hottest still day, right? It's just moving, so it will move a hair on your body, but we're so out of our body, we can't feel that. So just standing and being aligned and being that conduit for the energy would be the first thing that I would say is where we start, right? And once we can, from that still place, be connected, then no matter what we do, we still hold that connection, right? We still hold that connection. So if I'm standing and breathing and doing a Qigong exercise, I am relaxed, I am letting go, I am not only focused on myself, but I am also connected to everything around me. So like, and when we first did our standing exercises or sitting exercises, the instruction is to align, lengthening from above and rooting into the ground with integrity, widening in relationship to oneself, others, and the universe, deepening forward and back to the space that is yours, fully and completely, past, present, and future, in a single unfolding moment, centering around your intention, fully and completely, the intention that is part of you and part of an extended intention of a complete universe. So with those type of intentions, with our movements, actually remind us why we are doing what we are doing. Sometimes, you know, we have such an eclectic smorgasbord of things that we can pick from or allow us to distract ourselves, that we need these affirmations spoken to remind us what we're doing. Even I, as a teacher, I find myself when I'm teaching and telling my students these affirmations and setting a posture and creating a container for them, I sometimes say, oh, that's for me too, right? We get so habitual that even our training is habitual. So we have to break ourselves out of that habit, right? And remember, this is our practice too, I hope that answers your question. Long way around, but.
That's lovely. I really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you so much.
I have a question too.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm loving this, Zochi. I can't wait to see your book. Let us make sure let us know how to get it. Because it sounds
okay. Well, October.
Great.
I'm finishing off one chapter that was not done, and which talks about integration.
Well,
but please continue.
But yeah, please let us know. Let Salim know however you do it, that where and when we can get it. I'm loving the quality of this conversation and your thinking. My question, it has to do with something you said earlier about being in the flow and attached at the same time, because that's something that I struggle with.
Right.
And go back to first principles, and we're all one, and yet I do make this distinction between teacher and student. And if we're all one, there are no distinctions. Or make this distinction between good and being out of good health, disease. But if we're all one, there are no distinctions. And so it's a struggle because, as you said earlier, you're working with a group and you realize that you're in the process too. You're learning too. So how do you? If you could say a little bit more about how you think about that tension or that distinction, and in your work and in your practice.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. That's a great question. It's something I addressed in, excuse me, the early part of my book. Is that there's two parts of that. One, the classics and all of our internal practices talks about duality, and that we have to, we have to get out of that state or either or, from the saying, as it is above, so is it below, right? And then we're faced with the society that is constantly challenging that, which doesn't allow us to live in that moment, right? We're being pulled black and white, right? Because these are physical things, or maybe they are physical things. I'll put it that. I have my own opinion. These are illusions, or maybe like in my science fiction book, this is we're in elementary school, and these challenges that are presented to us are to teach us to stand in our values, right? To stand and recognize who we are, and also recognize these conditions, but by us changing ourselves and then having these relationships with others, the duality melts away, right? So that's one thing, and our intention. I talk, it's like intention is an action. Intentions are an action that we become a vibration in the universe that makes our practices, our movement practices, for our movements in the world change. But sometimes in our duality, we may have an intention to do something, but we also have a sub-intention that is preventing us to do our intention, because we either don't believe in our intention, or we're not clearly stating our intentions into the universe. So that's one of the things that, those are two things. And I really firmly believe in repeating our affirmations aloud and internally. It reminds me of a kind of a self-defense. So in the martial half of my world, for self-defense, the first thing, so you verbally speak, hey, stop, whatever, and you're speaking that, or you might shout out loud, no, stop, go back. we do that not just for ourselves, or shall I say, not for the aggressor, but we do that so we ourselves can shake ourselves out of the fight, flight, and freeze, right? We do that so that others can hear what we are saying in a self-defense form of practice. So taking it back into an internal practice of setting our intentions and speaking them out loud is that, like my grandmother would say, words are real and alive things. So what we speak in the world will happen. So I've always carried that as a treasure to remember that I speak my intention out in the world, and my behavior and movement follows that.
Thank you.
So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. So any other questions, or we can wrap it up?
It's up to the community. If there's anything else, feel free to chime in. Any feedback, thoughts, reflections, inspirations. Go ahead, Linda.
Zochi, I'm so grateful for this conversation, and this whole time I feel myself getting all tingly, and I can really nerd out on these principles that you speak of, and everything's really resonating with me, as you know, whether I'm practicing or I'm teaching. And two things I want to point out that make me feel so excited in part of this process is the idea of offering a space, you know, whether you're taking yourself out of the way or other things out of the way, and then offering this brave space. It resonates with me so much as an arts practitioner, because I think when people are performing or they have a story to tell, there can always be an assumption that they want to reach an end goal of, I need to get emotional at this point, or the drama and the story have to happen like this, and I'm gonna say this line this way. And what I love about what I do is sharing the exact same principles that you're sharing in terms of observing and listening and being vulnerable in a space of emptiness, and connecting with you know, things that other people have mentioned about the embodiment and finding that harmony is that as a performer you need to be in your body, you need to be using all your senses, and so I love using that practice to share, not only to practice for myself, but to share in community, as you mentioned, like doing the training and the movement for the greater movement. So I just get really excited about it, because I think that an actor can have the wrong assumption in trying to get to the end goal first, instead of being that vessel to serve the story and to go from one moment to the next moment, and in offering that space and listening, that whether it's the universe or creation or that other person, whatever, that single energy that we all share, to play in that space of listening and receiving and trusting that your next line or your next response is going to be guided by your ability to be open and to listen and to observe. And so getting back to your earlier question about that, do you feel like how do you know when you're in harmony? So I believe that it's constantly moving, and it's constantly, it takes you, if you're in the present moment, it'll take you to the next. And so I feel like that the image of the yin yang symbol comes to mind for me, that it's the path in between that circles around and it waves through the two energies, that is a kind of a visual representation of how I see trying to find that harmony and to stay on that constantly moving path.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, because that is the magic or the alchemy of practice and change, is that we as teachers, we invite the student to step out of their ego for a moment of time into a safe place and to explore who they really are and not how they've been defined in the cubicles that have been set for us in the society. And by doing that, we discover a wide variety of possibilities that we never even considered to be there. It's if once we step out of this, our framework, and a whole world is being presented to us of possibilities. A whole different dialogue is being had versus the conversation that we normally have, that is sometimes quite boring or sometimes repetitive, and it always brings us back to a single spot. It's like the person that always is falling in the hole. What do they have to do to, they can go to the left, they can go to the right, they can go behind, they can even attempt to cross over the hole, but they always end in the hole, right? It is in our freedom, and our ability to let go of who we believe we are and discover something different, that we have a full range of capacity building activities. So that is definitely, because we're all actors, really. Come on, we've all been assigned a role. We come into the world, we've been assigned, okay, you're a guy, you're a girl, right? We start getting placed in these frames. Oh, you're smart. No, you're not so smart. All right. Oh, no, you have to go to the back of the room. We're all put in these boxes, and the social norm does this to keep us separate, right? But these practices that we have are trying to unite us, to say, okay, get out of your habitual life and step into your true nature, right? Get out of your habitual life and step into your true nature. And you can't do that in a box. And you can't just do it in a studio. You have to do it in your entire life. And that's the beauty of our practices. When we start examining them, not just taking them we go into the classroom and then somebody shows us an asana or a movement and we can hold it or we feel really strong about it. It's really peeling away the peeling so we can actually see underneath it, because that's what the practice is supposed to do, is to get underneath the skin and actually show us who we are. So thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Yeah, it's making me emotional. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zochi. Usually the sanghas, we kind of keep going until we're ready to close. So some of the recordings are pretty long, and so whatever it needs to be, it's what's going to be. I do want to just share an announcement. This weekend we have the Rising Festival taking place, and we're very excited about it. a lot of beautiful people coming together to share in these arts. And I'm going to put the link right here. It's 100% donation based, so everyone is able to join. But I'll put the link in the chat. And I'll also like to ask you, Zochi, if people want to reach out and connect with you, what would be the best way? Would that be like email or I was looking at your Instagram, but I don't very much. Yeah.
I'm not an Instagram person.
Yeah.
Usually it is email or WhatsApp, and I have a U.S. WhatsApp number 1-510-987-6191, and those are the two primary ways to reach me. That would be the two best ways to reach me right now. And soon I will have a kind of a blog. I've been writing the blog, but I haven't posted it up. And so by October, there will be a new blog, and also the book will be out. So it'll have its own page there. And so we'll be offering a special deal for the first 100 people that purchase the book. And it has been an adventure in itself. The book has been, for me, an opportunity to step out of my fear and step out of my egos, and then just go through the journey, to stay in the flow. And when I feel stuck, and if I breathe and do what I've been trained to do, I'm amazed at what happens, what comes through me. And I see the whole book as something that is really coming through me and not necessarily by me.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Zochi. I'd also love to extend the invitation for your book. We have a shop on the Synergy website in which we share the books and different, we have a friend that makes some wonderful tea. My mentor, Audrey Peterman, who's part of our Circle of Elders, her book is on our Synergy shop. Maybe we can put your book there, and everything goes directly to it. Just be like hosting your link there, so it gets channeled to you, just giving a wider audience to the book. So whenever it's ready.
I appreciate that. Definitely, we can talk. Yeah, since I appreciate the offer, I probably will take you up on it, because it's really really focused on these internal practices.
Yeah.
And especially as teachers, what our role can be in a changing world, what our role can be in all of this uncertainty. My teacher would tell me there's a difference between an instructor and a teacher. And she would say that the instructor just teaches what's there, they teach the movement, they stay within the framework of the discipline. But a teacher moves the student beyond the physicality of space and place and changes the dynamic of the individual that walked into the door and they can walk out. One bite at a time, one little piece at a time. So for me, the book is a teaching tool, and be happy to share it with you guys and share it with your community. And hopefully you'll get something out. It's simply written. It's a quick read. And I think it has a lot of inner threads that are woven together to be a book. So
wonderful.
Thank you so much, Zochi. I think we're welcome to keep chatting a little if we have a few more minutes, but Francisco, I think we can probably wrap up the recording side.